In this course you will learn about hacking Linux systems. So Linux systems are mostly used on servers. Now there are people that use Linux on the desktop, but there's a very tiny minority. So mostly it will be about hacking servers. A server is a computer, a dedicated computer, usually in companies, that provides all kinds of applications. For example, when you surf the web, there's a web server that gives you the website. Now there are many different computers called those servers, and it can be a web server, but it can also be a video game server or file server. There's all kinds of servers, and usually they run Linux. In this course we'll go specifically about hacking Linux systems. We'll use a Linux-based system for hacking as well, called Kali Linux. So if you go to kali.org, you can download that system. You'll see www.kali.org, which is a system specifically designed for hacking. You'll see Kali Linux is a Linux distribution for hacking, security research, forensic, and so on. So you can download that from the web, from kali.org. You can download different versions of it depending on your needs. So this system has all kinds of hacking tools. If I go to the little start menu here, you'll see there's all kinds of applications like attacks for hacking Wi-Fi, password-based attacks, database attacks, web hacking. All kinds of tools are included with this system by default. So it's really a system, a computer system for hacking. And it's named Kali Linux. Now it has many of those tools. Some are graphical tools, and you'll see it comes with some basics also, like there's a web browser. Firefox is included by default, Notepad, File Explorer. So there are some like default tools you might use as well, but it comes with many hacking tools, and that is the power of this system. It's really a hacking oriented system that we'll use in this course. So if you don't have Kali yet, you can download it from kali.org, and you can install it depending on your needs. So you might run it in a virtual machine like VirtualBox. You can run it in the cloud, on mobile. You can also just run it on your computer if you install it. It's the bare metal version, that is just mean install it into your computer. You can also do it on a USB based, so you can install Kali Linux on a drive, USB flash drive, and once you plug it in, it starts this system. So different ways that you can run Kali Linux on your computer. That's the system what we'll use, and you'll learn specifically about hacking Linux servers. So let's do the first step, which is collecting information about our targets. So as you know, Linux usually runs on servers. Linux is also used on Android phones, so any Android-based system is actually running Linux underneath, and many home appliances as well. But we'll focus specifically on servers, on Linux servers in this course, about hacking those. And so one thing to know is that any device on the internet has its own address called an IP address. You'll see here, for example, there's someone in the US or in I think it's the US, where they have this IP address. So every IP address or internet address consists of 4 digits between the numbers 0 and 255. So every number here is a number between 0 and 255, and together they make up the internet address. So the address, the unique address of the device. And that address is used to communicate with the computer. Similar to how, for example, in the postal system, everyone has their unique zip code to communicate using post messages. On the internet, devices have an IP address to communicate with each other. An IP address, the internet address, it's unique for the device. Now there's two kind of IP addresses. There's public addresses and network addresses. So the public addresses are all the devices on the internet accessible, and the public addresses are all the devices behind a network device. So here you'll see there's one public address, and the other are all network addresses, and those start with 192.168. And sometimes they might start with 10.10 or 172. So that's how you can recognize them. The address here starts with 82, that's an internet address. The others are network addresses. So you can find an internet address of any device. For example, we open a terminal and we can use the ping command to find the IP address of a server. So Remember, we're going to attack Linux servers. So we can, for example, say ping the website, and you'll see this is the internet address of google.com. So the computer running the google.com website. Now you can do that with any, you can use the ping command with any website. For example, I might try twitter.com, and you'll see we got the IP address, the computer address of twitter.com. So that's computer running the twitter.com website. And in the case of before, this is a computer, the address of a computer running the google.com website. So in this course, we'll hack a fictitious website which exists on my local network. So it's not possible to repeat the steps because this target website only exists in my network. However, you can use the techniques you'll learn in this course for hacking anything. So we'll use the ping command on the fictitious website to get the IP address. And of course we need the IP address because that's how we communicate with the server or with the computer. So remember this image where without the IP address the computer doesn't know who to communicate with. So the IP address or the internet address is the unique address of the device that we use for communication. That's why we use the ping command to find the IP address of the device. And now, because we target servers are computers that provide all kind of services. Like it can be a web server where it provides internet pages like google.com or twitter.com. It might also have a database running, maybe remote desktop can be running, maybe file sharing, so you can imagine Dropbox or services like that. So different applications can be running on a server. And you can scan a server for what applications are running using a program called Nmap. So if you type Nmap with an IP address, so we'll copy this IP address that we got from the ping command, it will tell you which applications are running. So Nmap with your target IP address, and then you'll see which applications are running. So in this case, it's running two services, the SSH service and the HTTP service. You'll see it also has a state, so it can be open or closed. So those lines are open, and every line, every application communication line has a unique port. So, and they have a unique port, a unique number, because servers, they can get lots of data. They can receive all kind of data all the time. And somehow the server needs to know, what is this application for? Is this data on the line for the web server? Is it for the database? Is it for file sharing? Is it for music? So it needs to know, differentiate between the types of data, and it does so using port numbers. So in this case, port 22 is for secure shell, and port 80 is for application, web application, HTTP. So now we know some basics about the target system. However, we don't know, for example, is this server even running Linux? Maybe it's a Windows server, or maybe it is some other kind of server. We also don't know the version numbers of the applications, so which applications are used inside that server. So you can use the -A flag, which stands for aggressive. That will provide you with more information. So that will tell you, is it, for example, a Linux server? Which software applications are actually used? So -A flag is very useful to get more information about our target. So I scan now with the -A flag, and it will tell you version numbers and the specific software that is used. So here you'll see the general Nmap banner. Then we see here the two services along with more information. So you'll see here SSH service, and it's running this application, OpenSSH 8.9. It also tells us, hey, it's running Ubuntu Linux. So now we know that our target is running Ubuntu Linux. Now, also we have another service, the web service, and for the application they use is Apache HTTPD 2.4.52. So we get that information because simply we added the -A flag. We also know our target is a Linux system, and our best guess is of course Ubuntu Linux. So now we know more information about our target system because we used Nmap with the -A flag. So before we run Nmap on our target website, that told us that it's running two applications. Let me just do a regular scan. It's running two applications. It's running a web server, HTTP, and SSH. So the first thing we might try to do is web enumeration to collect some more information about what web applications it's actually running. So one thing we could do is just go to the web address. In this case, the web address office.job in this example. So we can say office.job. And okay, this is the company website, but we don't know what files are actually there or directories. So what we might do is actually use a tool called GoBuster to scan for directories that are on this web server and hidden files. So GoBuster is included in Kali Linux by default. So we can say GoBuster, and it has several modes. For example, we can scan for subdomains or we can scan for directories. In this case, let's just scan for directories. That tries to find hidden directories using a word list. So if I just type GoBuster, you'll see we need to install it. So press yes. And it will install it. And GoBuster is using a word list that is included by default Kali Linux. So many word lists are included in Kali Linux. If you open the File Explorer, so home, and then go to user share word lists, you'll see different word lists. For example, for DIRB or DIRBuster, there's different word lists. This is, for example, just a list of possible directory names. So it will try every directory name and see if it exists. And of course, the goal is to find hidden directories or hidden files that are not so easily accessible, but are available on the web server. So now we can type GoBuster, and you'll see there are several flags here we can use. We can use the dir flag, the DNS flag, and some others. So let's go for the scan for directories. So we will type GoBuster dir --URL, that's our target website, and we want to scan using our word list. So --word list, which was in user share word list DIRBuster. Now there are many different word lists here. For example, small word list, a medium, large, or larger word lists. I'll just go for the small one for this example. So for the small one, so this command should scan the target website for hidden directories and files. So it uses in this case, the small word list here, and it will try does /index exist, does /images exist, does /download exist, and so on. It will go through this whole list of words and see if any of those directories exist. So we just press enter, and you'll see it's scanning the server, and it found immediately some directories. For example, it found /files, /photos, /admin. So that one might be very interesting. Maybe we can log in or do something like that. Some general assets and forms. But also /files, right? So we could go to the /files directory. And hey, we found some documents here, the annual reports and agreements. So we found some hidden files in the /files directory. But we also found some others here, like photos and /admin. So we can try to open those as well. We might open, for example, the /admin page, and here we find a login page, apparently for the administrator, which might be called admin. I mean, it says here admin. And also some other like photos and assets. So using the DIRBuster, or sorry, the GoBuster command, so GoBuster dir with the URL and the word list, you can scan for hidden directories. You can also search for specific files if you want to, when you say -x, for example, PHP files, TXT files, HTML, PDF, and so on. But if you just want to search for directories, you can use this command to search for hidden directories. And once you press enter, it scans for all the hidden directories. So in this case, it found these directories using the word list. Now keep in mind, it can only find directories that are using that word list. So in this case, this small word list. Of course, you can, if you search for using a larger word list, you might find more directories, because it can be that the word list doesn't just, the smaller word list doesn't contain all the possible words, right? So you might want to search instead with the medium or a larger word list. So this is called web enumeration, and the idea is to enumerate the web to find hidden directories and files that might be useful. So in this case, we found the files directory with some, and we found the admin directory. Then seems to have a login form. So we found the IP address of our target computer using the ping command. So we type ping with the website. That gave us the IP address. Then we were able to scan it using Nmap to see which applications are running on the server. And in this case, it was running HTTP, and so HTTP was the web service that we looked at, and the other is SSH. SSH allows you to remotely log into a computer and do administration. So SSH is just a default tool that system admins use, and Linux users in general, allows you to remotely control a computer. So what you can do with SSH is SSH log into a certain computer. For example, we can try the target computer and type yes. And what we then need is username and password. Now, probably the username is not Kali. When we scanned the server before, with -a, it gave us more information. For example, it told us that it was a Ubuntu server. So maybe the username is Ubuntu, like the default username. You'll see the server is running Ubuntu. So we might try SSH. We might try to log in with SSH and say Ubuntu at our target IP address. See Ubuntu at. And if we do that, we only need to guess the password, right? So maybe we can keep trying the password until we catch the correct one. But that's very inconvenient because see, now we need to wait 3 seconds before we can type the next password. So what we can do instead is use a password cracking tool called Hydra. Hydra lets us do this automatically. So this kind of attack where instead of typing passwords manually, it's using a password list. So we can type Hydra, then the -L with the username. So our guess is that the username is Ubuntu because it's a Ubuntu system, right? It's also possible to try and look on the website, say, okay, what could be a username, maybe in the contact or employee names working there. Or you can use a password list, username list, say users.txt, where you have a list of possible users that might be used. So in this case, let's just guess the password or the username is Ubuntu. Then we need a password list. We're not going to do this one by one automatically. So -p, and then we specify a password list. Kali Linux comes with many password lists. So if you go to the directory users share word lists, you'll find, for example, a password here, rockutxt.gz. So I'm going to copy that to the home directory and then right-click extract because it is a GZ file, it's like a zip file. Now, if we refresh this folder, you'll see we have a large list. I can actually take a look in that list. If I output that list, rockutxt, you'll see lots and lots of commonly used passwords, and it's just like 40 million commonly passwords. So it's very probable that the password of the server is in there. So we'll type rockutxt and then the target. Now in this case, we want to target SSH, right? When we did the Nmap scan, before it was running SSH and HTTP, and we want to crack SSH. So we type SSH:/ with the IP address. So with the IP address and with a bit of luck, we can then crack the password. We then can find the password of that user if it exists. So this is gonna take a while because of course it will try every password in that 14 million, in that list of 14 million passwords. So depending on if the password is in the list and where it is in the list, it can take longer or shorter time to find the password of that computer, of the SSH login. Okay, so now it found the username password. So what we now are able to do is to log in as the Ubuntu user, because Ubuntu seems to be an existing user and we know the password. Of course, whatever you find, you want to store it in notes. So I'm gonna copy this into a notepad, because we might use it later on, or maybe we forget it. So it's important to just write down your notes of what you're doing, just to, as a sort of second brain where you can look back into. So now we have the username and password, so we can try to log in with SSH, log into IP address or use the name, Now we know the password because it just found it. It's diamond. And now we are inside the target server. We're inside the Ubuntu computer. So we found the password using Hydra. And now we can browse around in the server. For example, we might go to the web directory, or you might go anywhere else, maybe etc directory. And of course, now we are the default user. So we are the Ubuntu user. On any system, the system administrator is called root. So what a hacker will try to do next is to become administrator, or the root user. Root is administrator in Linux. And so because now we have just user level privilege, now we are just a regular user, but we want, of course, to be system administrator. We want to become root. So that's the next step that hackers will often try to do. So before we found the password of the user Ubuntu, so we could log in with SSH, the regular user, using that password that we found before. But now we are just a regular user. So what a hacker will try to do next is to become the root user. Root is the Linux administrator, so that is R-O-O-T, that's how it's spelled. So the idea is, of course, to become root, so that we would see root at Ubuntu instead of Ubuntu. You can see your current user using the command who am I, and you'll see we are just a regular user. And we want to become administrator user because then we can add more users. We can make sure that we can always log in. Maybe we install software or delete software, or install software, or do anything, right? So that's what a hacker will try to do next, is to become the administrator or root user on the Linux computer. Now this technique is called Linux privilege escalation. I have a course on Linux privilege escalation where I really go into depth into all kind of tricks you can use to become the root user. In this case, you just might try some simple things like look in the bash history file or output the shadow file. On any Linux system, there's two files that is important. There is the etc password file that shows that's a file containing all the usernames, and a file called etc shadow. So we can take a look maybe into those files depending on the permissions. So if the permissions are set wrong, we can look in the etc password file. We can type cat to output the file contents. You'll see this shows all the usernames. Now, of course, the user we are most interested in is the root user. So you'll see here all the information, like we have user Ubuntu with the user ID, group ID, also the directory of the user's files, and if they can log in or not. So in this case, we have, for example, user SSHD, which cannot log in, but user Ubuntu, they can log in. They have the bash shell. So the more interesting file, of course, is the etc shadow file. So maybe if the permissions are wrong, you can just output it. So cat etc shadow, and you'll see that outputs the passwords. So in this case, Ubuntu with our password, but this is not our actual passwords. You'll know that our password is diamond and not this cryptic code. So what has actually happened is that the password is so-called hashed. Hashing is a technique to store the password securely. And so when a password is hashed, it is not stored in clear text or readable text like here, but instead it's in cryptic format. So for example, you can try hashing online. If I type, for example, there's different programs to hash, but let's say we type MD5, which is one of the hashing programs, and type anything, for example, passwords, and you'll see that corresponds to this output. So it's a technique to store any text into in a so-called hash, and that hash is not readable by the attacker. However, what you can try to do is now crack the hash. So of course we know the password of Ubuntu, but let's just try it for example. So we're gonna save this onto our computer, and I'm gonna save it as a hash. So save it into a file. And then what you can try to do is use a program called John the Ripper to crack it. So you can type John and format. So the hashing format on this computers is crypt. And then we try to crack that file. So I'm gonna press enter, and it will try cracking the password file or the password hash. And after some time, it might find the actual password. So you see now it cracked this hash, and the password for Ubuntu is diamond, which is of course what we found out earlier. What we're interested in is the password of root. So if we can read etc shadow file, what we then can try to do is to find the root passwords. So if we can do cat etc shadow, so output the file contents, you'll see the username password format. So every parameter is specified with a colon or separated by a colon, and you'll see, for example, if I scroll up here, we have the root password, and that goes all the way to the colon. So the separator here between the line is the colons. So you have to copy the username, colon, all the way of the passwords, and the colon again. Gonna copy that, or actually without the last colon, so we're gonna copy that. So the colon is the separator. That's important to keep in mind. So it's not a dot or a dollar sign or anything like that. The colon is the actual separator. So I'm gonna save that into a file called root hash. Of course, you can name the file anything you want. Then we'll type John, format is crypt, with the root hash file, and that will try to crack the root hash. Now that can take a moment, of course, depending on which password for root is used. And you'll see now we found the root password, so we can log in as root and use its password to be root. So we could type su on Linux, that changes your permissions to the root user, and now we know the root password. So we can try the password. If we now type who am I, you'll see now we are the root user. So this is just one of the techniques that might work for becoming root. Now it might be that etc shadow file is not readable at all, so that we cannot do this. It would say permission denied, so not this command. Maybe it says permission denied and we cannot do that. In that case, there's other techniques. For example, we might look in the history file. Maybe the administrator typed their password wrong. So for example, if I look in the .bash history, here we see the administrator typed their password wrong, so we would be able to now become root. Now in the course on privilege escalation, I'll go into many different techniques you can use to become the administrator or root user on a Linux system. So once you have initial access, you would then want to become administrator. So these are just two of the techniques that you might use to become administrator or root user in a Linux system. Now remember, we found an admin form. So when we opened the target company site, there was a login form. So we had this login form where we had username, password, and would be able to log in if we knew the username, password. So we could guess that the login is admin maybe or something else, and we could try to guess the password. And you'll see when we just type something random, we got back wrong username or password. So what we might try to do is to crack this login form, and maybe that will allow us to do something more, because usually login forums, after logging in, you have more power, right? Maybe you can control the server or do something else, some administrative task, completely depending on the web application. So what we can try to do is open a tool called the Burp Suite. So in the start menu here, we can scroll down to Web Application Analysis and click Burp Suite. So Burp Suite is a tool for hacking web applications, and it's quite heavy, so it takes some time to start up. You can just click Next and click Start Burp, and that's gonna start up for a moment. Now using that tool, we will try to log in, try to crack the login. So the way this works is by intercepting web requests, so by sitting in between the web browser and your computer, and then you can manipulate all kind of things. So we'll go to proxy, and in proxy click intercept is off and open web browser, which is that will start the web browser. We'll go to the website, and next we want to intercept our login, so we click intercept is on. So we click that button. And now, for example, we can try admin with some password and click login. So you'll see that intercepted the request. Now, if we click forward, it will just forward it. But what we want to do is try different passwords here. So you'll see the request here. It's a post request, and some other mumbo jumbo here. That's a little pop-up of Kali. Some other mumbo jumbo here. That doesn't really matter. But what we can do is forward this request to the intruder tab. You'll see all kind of tabs here. So I right click, forward to intruder, send to intruder. And then in the intruder tab, I'll go to positions. And in here, clear the $sign. That will clear all the $sign thing now. You can post the cookie, but we don't really need to. So depending on the web application. And the username might be okay, but we want to try different passwords. So we double click on the password and click add $signs. Then next step is to set up the payloads. So we want to specify a list of passwords that it should try. So we go to payloads and it's a simple list. Click load. And I'm gonna click pass.txt, which is a very short list of passwords just for demonstration purposes. Then I'm gonna click start attack. And what it will do is try every password one by one in that list. And okay, my window just disappeared. Click start attack. That will start the attack, and it's doing a password attack. So you'll see once I click on it, you'll see at the request now it's trying password 123, 1234, 12345, admin, admin 123, whatever is in your list. And these have a return code. So you'll see most of them have return code, in this case 301. And that's based on the status code. Any web server has status codes. You can see if the password is correct or not. So 200 is an okay result. So we can sort by status. And you'll see we have the password here 123456. So we can use that to log in. So if we now know the password, because it was okay, the window went really bad. It has status code 200. So in this case the password is 123456. We close this. We go back to proxy, intercept is off. Now we'll type the username, the password that we just found, 123456, login, and you'll see now we have just cracked this login form. So we did that using the Burp Suite. It's one of the tools you can use for cracking web logins. And you'll see now we are able to restart the server, to add user, change password, and even open a terminal. So of course it completely depends on what kind of a web application is running. For example, if you do this to crack a WordPress login, you only have blogging software optionality. But it might be something completely different, like an administration panel. It depends completely on what the system administrator installs. But using the Burp Suite, we can start to attack any login form. So if I log out, let's do it again. So we close all this. We go to the Burp Suite. You can also type it on top. So it takes a moment to start up. We start it. Then once it's started, what we want to do is to start a web browser. So we go to proxy, intercept is off, open the web browser. Then we go to the target website. In this case, officejob/admin with the login panel. In this case, we just guess the username password. We just guess the username is admin, but of course you might also try to find the admin username, or maybe look up on LinkedIn which people work there and try to guess it, or you could try a username list. So what we can do, turn intercept on, then we might try admin and type anything, click login. So that intercepts the request. We do a right click, send to intruder. Click on the intruder tab, go to positions, click clear, $sign. You can remove the cookie depending on what you want, and then double click on the password here, or whatever parameter it's using. These parameters can be different depending on the login form. I'm gonna click add with the $sign. Then go to payloads and select your list. So click on load and select your password list. In this case, I'm using pass.txt. You might try a longer list depending on the program. And then we can do start attack that will start the password attack and try different passwords. So you can click on them one by one and see that it's actually trying. If you scroll down, password 1234, 12345, and here it found the password. And we know that because the status is 200 and also the length. So if we store it on status or store it on length, we can find the correct password. So in this case, we used Burp Suite to find the correct password that you can then use to log in into the administration panel. Now you might find different web applications running, and of course some might have a login form that you can crack, but it could also be that there's another type of vulnerability. There's many different types of vulnerabilities that are possible in web applications. For example, they might have a database problem where you can use a SQL injection to gain access. Or they might have something more simple like a local file inclusion. For example, here we have a web application that is running on the server, a Notes web app where apparently they can open notes on the computer system. For example, here we have note1.txt. And what we can try is a local file inclusion. So here it opens note1.txt, which has this file contents. And on any system, there are different directories, just like on Windows and in Mac. And usually websites are stored in the directory var www. So inside the var directory. And all of the directories are in the / directory. So for example, if I browse my computer, you'll see we can go to the computer directory, file system, and then there's all kind of directories. For example, the var directory, which can store websites. There is the root directory for the administrator, the home directory, the etc directory for configuration files, and so on. So what we can try to do is move up from the directory of the website all the way up, so all the way to the / directory and then into the etc directory, which contains configuration files. So the way to do that is similar to how we would move directories inside a Linux terminal. So now we are in the /home Kali directory. To move up directory, we can type cd ... Now if I show the current directory, we're in the /home directory. If I type cd ... we're now in the / directory, and we might move into the etc directory. So using ... you can move up one directory. So we might try that. So instead of note1.txt in the parameter, we might try ... and we don't know exactly which directory it is in, but let's say we try it a few times and then open the file etc passwords. And you'll see now what we opened here is the password file. So now we can see all the users in the systems. Now the formatting is a bit messed up here, but we can see all of the files on all of the contents of this file on the system. For example, there's the root user and all the other users that exist on this computer. So now we would be able to open any file. We might open the issue file, etc issue, which in this case it's Ubuntu version 22, and any configuration file can now be opened if the user has permissions to open them, right? So because we were able to type ... so because in our URL we were able to type ... all the way up to the home directory or to the root directory, we can then try to open any file on the system. Now you might think, okay, who cares? You might try, for example, to open the shadow file, which contains the passwords. So we can try shadow. And now we have the shadow file here. It's the usernames and also the passwords in hash format. Now remember, hash is a technique to make the passwords unreadable, and hashes can usually be cracked. So if I copy the first line with root, and the separator is the colons here. So if I zoom in a bit, you'll see there's many colons here. If I click highlight all, you'll see many different columns, and the columns separate between the type of data. So it has the username, then the password, and then some other information. So for example, we have the Ubuntu user here, colon, and then the hash of the password. So we're going to copy that to the actual password, but in hash format, and then we'll crack it. So we'll type, for example, store it in Ubuntu.txt, save it, and now we can try to crack it using John the Ripper. John -- format is crypt, It is the Linux format, and then the actual data we just stored. And once you show it, it will dump the password. Now John the Ripper has some cache, so I will remove that. It's a hidden directory called .john. And now when we run it again, you'll see it's actually cracking the hash that we just stored. In a moment or so, if it finds the password, it will then dump it. So just because of one security mistake, we now have the username Ubuntu with its passwords that we can then use to log in over, in this case SSH or wherever it is used. Now we have the password of the user Ubuntu. So just because of this simple mistake where we can use / all the way up to the etc, or all the way up to the root directory. So all the way up to this root directory, we can then try to open any file on the file system and to get access into the system. In this case, we did that by opening the file shadow, which contains the username and password hashes. So of course, this will only work if this vulnerability exists in the web application, so that we can actually move. So they might try in the web applications to actually filter that and say, okay, if there's a dot or / in the URL, we're gonna block that. So depending on the programmer. And of course, in this case, if the permissions are set wrong. So in this case, we have permission to read the etc shadow file. If that permission doesn't exist, then of course you wouldn't be able to read this file. So it depends on the circumstances. You might find some vulnerabilities in the web application. So there might be a login form where is the vulnerability. Might be that you can do a local file inclusion that we did in this video. Might be that there is a database vulnerability with SQL injection. So it really depends on the web application. In this example, we had a local file inclusion vulnerability where we were able to read the shadow file.